So it's a year 262 after Aegon's conquest. That's 35 years before the events that kick off Game of Thrones. Aerys Targaryen, the second of his name, just ascended to the Iron Throne in King's Landing. During the first years of his reign, the Seven Kingdoms are actually thriving, and this ambitious young king is doing his best to maintain prosperity. He replaces a majority of the old administration with fresh faces. Pretty soon, Aerys befriends this young knight, Ser Tywin Lannister, heir of Casterly Rock. Being super impressed by the Lannisters' administrative skills and ruthlessness, he brings Tywin to the royal court and appoints him as Hand of the King. It's a smart move because the new hand perfectly complements the king's shortcomings. Aerys wants to be the greatest ruler the Seven Kingdoms has ever seen. While Aerys is busy boasting about his grandiose plans, building a new wall in the north or a shiny marble city on the other bank of the Blackwater, it's Tywin who's painstakingly working to ensure that the kingdoms actually thrive. Years pass, and it's slowly becoming obvious that the realm's prosperity is in fact solely due to Tywin's merit. Though he gains little love for his service because he's stern, insensitive, and brutally effective, Aerys quickly grows jealous of his hand, and their relationship, which was never easy, gets even more complicated. The king's mental health deteriorates over the years after multiple miscarriages and stillborns by his sister wife Rhaegar, and then there's the Duskendale Mutiny, where Aerys gets captured by mutineers and imprisoned for half a year. Although Lord Tywin and Ser Barristan Selmy manage to free him, from then on the king fears for his life and doesn't leave the Red Keep in King's Landing at all. His suspicious nature gradually plunges into paranoia, and Aerys slowly descends into madness. This is the story of how the Mad King's reign came crashing down and changed Westeros forever. Chapter 1. The Spark of Rebellion. The Breaking Point. So Aerys soon starts to undermine Tywin's actions as Hand and belittle his achievements. But even after the death of his beloved wife, Tywin stands firmly at the king's side. Yet things start to change in 281 AC when King Aerys appoints Tywin's son and heir, 15-year-old Jaime Lannister, as the youngest ever member of the Kingsguard. On the surface, it's a great honor for House Lannister. But with this cunning move, Aerys strips his hand of an heir. Lord Tywin, whose ambition is to restore the might of his house, is clearly enraged by the king's decision and soon returns to Casterly Rock, giving up his position as royal counselor. It seems the Targaryen king has finally accomplished his goal. Later that year, a great tournament takes place in Harrenhal as part of the festivities celebrating the advent of spring, even though winter hits back twice as hard later that year. Anyway, many of the great lords gather at Harrenhal, and even King Aerys himself attends the tourney. The day belongs to Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the crown, who manages to unhorse and defeat several renowned opponents. Yet after the last bout is won, the champion gets to choose a new queen of love and beauty. Surprisingly enough, Rhaegar rides past his own wife Ellie of Dorne and bestows the crown of blue roses to Lyanna Stark, daughter of the Lord of Winterfell. It's a scandalous act not only because the crown prince is married, but also because Lyanna is already betrothed to Lord Robert Baratheon. The fatal mistakes. Sometime later, Rhaegar and Lyanna meet again near Harrenhal, and soon both disappear using the help of the Kingsguard. While Rhaegar's behavior during the Harrenhal tournament seemed to be forgiven, the supposed abduction of Lyanna Stark is just too much to bear for her brother, Brandon Stark, heir of Winterfell. Brandon, together with his retinue, is on his way to wed Catelyn Tully in River Run. But as soon as he hears the news about his sister, he picks his best men and rides straight to the capital. He reaches the gates of the Red Keep and, being unaware that the prince isn't there, shouts for Rhaegar to come out, demanding his life. King Aerys has his company arrested for supposedly plotting to murder the crown prince, and summons his father to answer the alleged crimes. Lord Rhaegar Stark soon arrives in King's Landing with 200 men, and demands a trial by combat. The king grants his request, but chooses fire as the royal champion. While the Lord of Winterfell is burned alive, Brandon strangles himself to death trying to rescue his suffering father. Not a single Northman who accompanied Brandon and Rhaegar to the capital would ever see the North again. War breaks out. Afterwards, King Aerys demands Jon Arryn, Lord of the Vale, to send in the heads of Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, who are at the Eyrie and who are most likely eager to avenge the death of the Northmen. But Lord Arryn refuses to do so and instead raises his banners in open rebellion. Ravens are sent to all houses across the Seven Kingdoms to gain the much-needed support to oppose the Mad King. But other than the North and the majority of the Vale, only some parts of the Stormlands and Riverlands agree to join the cause. The rest either stand by the king's side or, like Tywin Lannister, remain neutral. Ned Stark, now Lord of Winterfell after the death of his father and older brother, travels back home to gather an army in the north. Robert Baratheon does the same and takes a ship south. Meanwhile, Jon Arryn successfully retakes the city of Gotown, occupied by Loyalist forces, and begins to deal with those who failed to support the Overlord of the Vale. In the south, Robert encounters similar problems as Jon had. Some of the houses of the Stormlands neglect to gather forces to support their lord and instead take the king's side. Yet Robert swiftly defeats his opponents in 3 separated encounters near Summerhall, and even manages to sway some of them to join the rebel side. The next months are marked by war preparations, and in late 282 AC, Robert finally departs Storm's End with his troops, marching to unite with the rebel forces in the north. Of course, those who remain loyal to the crown don't just sit and wait. Fierce Lord Randyll Tarly of Harrenhal, leading the vanguard of the combined forces from Reach, ambushes Robert's troops near Ashford and deals a considerable blow. The main force of the Loyalists, commanded by Lord Tyrell, eventually joins Tarly's vanguard, but Robert regroups and manages to retreat north despite the losses. The Lord of Highgarden eventually gives up the pursuit and decides to march east, soon besieging Storm's End. The garrison there is commanded by Robert's younger brother, Stannis Baratheon. That's not the end of Robert's problems, though. The royal contingent under Lord John Connington departs the capital hoping to intercept Robert's army. Connington traces him all the way to Stony September, where Robert tries to conceal himself using the help of the townsmen. Upon their arrival, the royal soldiers begin to search for the rebels, but without much luck. 2 days later, the united rebel forces under Lord Stark and Tully arrive from the north and engage the royal troops. Fierce fighting begins amid the town streets and alleys. It's said that Robert Baratheon stepped out of a brothel to join the battle and dueled Lord Connington, almost killing him. True or not, Connington sees that his men are losing to the larger rebel force and commands a general retreat. This is the first major victory for the rebel side in the war. Chapter 2, The Fall of the Dragon, the Final Gambit. When King Aerys hears that the royal troops have lost, he impulsively strips Lord Connington of his lands and titles and has him exiled. He also begins to realize that the rebellion is far more serious than he'd thought and could actually threaten his position. The Mad King orders his alchemists to cache wildfire pots in various parts of King's Landing in order to burn down the entire city in case of defeat. But the war isn't lost yet, and Prince Rhaegar is summoned back to the capital where he assembles another, bigger army. Using strong contingents from the Reach and Dorne, and with help of loyal houses from all over the kingdom, he manages to gather some 40,000 men willing to defend the Iron Throne. Eventually, the royal army marches out of King's Landing in the middle of summer, heading north to quell the rebellion once and for all. The rebel force consists predominantly of soldiers of the north, Vale, Stormlands, and Riverlands, though some of the houses of the latter 3 still support King Aerys. The amassed rebel army counts around 35,000 men in total. But what the rebel force lacks in numbers, it gains in battle experience and determination. The Battle of the Trident. When scouts report that Rhaegar's army is about to cross the Trident River, the rebels commanded by Robert march to engage them. Battle breaks out just as a majority of the royal forces cross the wide ford and get struck by the rebels. Tight combat rages for hours, as neither side is able to dominate the enemy. Even the successful charge led by the Valemen, which smashes the advancing right flank of Lewin Martell and kills the Dornish prince, can't turn the tide of the battle. Finally, somewhere in the center, Robert Baratheon reaches a position of Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and challenges him to single combat. Although Rhaegar manages to injure his opponent, Robert crushes the prince's chest with his warhammer in a killing blow. Rhaegar's armor shatters, and rubies encrusting his breastplate scatter all around. The death of the Crown Prince has an immediate effect on his troops. In a matter of minutes, all the royal forces are in full rout, and the battle is essentially over. The Kingslayer. The rebels now have an unobstructed route straight to the capital. Upon hearing who won the Battle of the Trident, Lord Tywin Lannister joins the war, gathers his army in Casterly Rock, and rushes east to capture King's Landing. Robert hasn't recovered from his injury yet, and requests his friend Lord Ned Stark to lead the vanguard of the rebel army to reach the capital before Tywin. But it's the Lannisters who arrive first, and Tywin tricks the king, convincing him to open the city gates. While the capital is sacked and looted with no regard for the life of its people, the remaining loyalist troops form the last stand at the Red Keep. A few days prior to Tywin's arrival, King Aerys sent his wife and second son Viserys to the safety of Dragonstone's stronghold. Yet he refused to allow Rhaegar's wife Elia Martell and her children to leave with him, suspecting that Prince Lewin Martell betrayed Rhaegar at the Trident. Seeing that all hope is lost, Aerys orders his master pyromancers to ignite the wildfire and burn the city together with 500,000 of its inhabitants. Yet the lone member of the King's Guard guarding the king at the Red Keep, Sir Jaime Lannister, realizes what Aerys wants to do and rushes to save the city by killing the head pyromancer. Being afraid that the Mad King could order another alchemist to ignite the wildfire, Jaime makes an uneasy decision, breaks his oath, and slays the Mad King, avoiding such catastrophe. Lord Tywin has to quickly find a way to prove his loyalty to the victors, so he orders his bannermen Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch to murder Princess Elia Martell and her children. The New Order. While Robert is crowned in King's Landing, being the only head of a great house truly wanting the Iron Throne, Ned Stark rides south, lifting the siege of Storm's End and reaching the Tower of Joy, where he finds his sister Lyanna dying with a child in her hands. The Mad King is dead, and the war is over. After almost 300 years of undisputed rule, House Targaryen no longer hold the Iron Throne, and its last remnants seek refuge in the East. The love affair between Rhaegar and Lyanna triggered the conflict that ultimately cost them their very lives and set in motion the most fundamental shift of power in the Seven Kingdoms since Aegon's conquest. Robert's rebellion changed everything. A dynasty that had ruled for centuries fell because of one prince's infatuation with a northern girl, a mad king's paranoia, and the courage of lords who refused to bend the knee to tyranny. The stage was now set for a new era, an era of conspiracies, betrayals, and a deadly Game of Thrones that would consume Westeros for generations to come.